Jnana-timirandasya Jananjana-shalakya Chakshunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri-Gurave Namaha Namashishtam Namāpi Satchiputram Akrasvarupam Rupam Tasyagrajamarupurim Maturim Vaśnavatam Radha Kundam Girivaram Maho Radhikamadhavasam Prapto Yashapatita Kripaya Shri Gurum Tammatosmi Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyaiva Cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavibhyo Namo Namaha Nikhila Shruti Male Ratnamaladiti Nirajita Padapankajanta Aji Mukta Kulairupashyamanam Paritashtam Harinam Samshayami Narupita Chirim Chirat Karunayavatarna Kalam Shamarpaitamannatazvalarasam Savaptishram Hari Puratas Sundara Dyuti Kadamba Sandipita Sada Hridaye Kandadesh Purato Vasachinandana Janlambita Bhujjo Kanakavadato Sankirtanaikapitaro Kamalaya Taksham Vishwambaro Dijavaro Jugadharmapala Vande Jagatpriyakari Karunavataru Ladini Shakti Swarupaya Gauranga Suridaya Cha Bhakta Shakti Pradhanaya Gadadhara Namastuti He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namastuti Radhe Vrindavanadishi Karunamritavahini Kripaya Nijapadabjavasyan Mahim Praviyatam Bhaktya Vihina Aparadha Lakshaya Shiktascha Kamaditarangamadhi Kripamai Tvam Shadanam Prapanam Brinde Maste Charanarvindam Vinde Maste Charanarvindam Srila Gurudev ki jai, Sriman Mahaprabhu ki jai, Shri Harinam Sankirtan ki jai, Gaur Bhaktavrinda ki jai, Gaur Premanand Hari Hari Bol. So, Pranam. Good morning to all of you from the Harmony Collective in Michigan. Here we are, one more day. And today, in the morning, we are having ISTAGOSTHI, or basically Q&A, where you are invited to present any questions you may have, any topics you may like to speak about, to further unfold, so we can nourish our sense of progressiveness in our Gaudiya school, so we all of us become aware of need for constant growth, sustainable but constant grow progress. So whatever you are, whenever you are connected now, whether it may be YouTube or Facebook, whatever questions you may have, please, you can share them in the thread, in the respective chats, and I will be receiving them here, and we can start addressing. Till now, no question has come. So I will begin with one question that was sent to me a few minutes ago by private message before starting this session. And this is a question from Danurdar Prabhu from Serbia, from Europe. And It's a question connected with the idea of Siddha-deha, and some other situations and topics related. It's a two-part question, we could say. Uh, but mostly I'm seeing here because it was sent in the chat. Mm-hmm. Let me see 1 second. Okay. It's actually one part. So I'll share it here with you. Give me 1 second. So sorry for the delay, technical details here. So I'm correcting some details regarding the English presentation of the question, so you can have it in a better shape here. Okay. I think we are there almost. Yeah. So there's some detail, technical orthographical details to solve. Sorry for that. It says, what is your opinion about Siddha-deha? And why Bhaktivinoda Thakur and Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj stopped the chain of Siddha-deha initiation, even that they received their Siddha-deha from the gurus. So we'll begin with this particular question, and then I see there are some other questions in the chat now. So, what is my opinion about Siddha-deha? and why? There are two. Well, it's actually two-part question. And why? On the other side, Thakur Bhaktivinoda Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur stopped the chain of Siddha-deha initiation, even though they received Siddha-deha from their gurus. Okay, we have spoken about that a few times. I will also recommend both to who made the question and to whoever may like to go in further detail to a series of lectures we gave, I think, last year or 2 years ago, maybe, about Raga Varma Chandrika from Sri Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. And we spent like at least like 4 or 5 lectures around this topic. Siddha Pranali, Kadash Bab, Manasi Seva, Lila Shmaranam, and so on. Manjari Bhav Sadhana. So, of course, here I will say something, but will not take the same time that took me to give those 5 lectures. So there you will have a much more detailed answer. So what do I think about Siddha-deha? Well, first, Siddha-deha means perfected body. And of course, the notion comes from different places. One of them, famous verse from Srila Rupa Goswami, Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, one of 3 main verses about what Raga Bhakti is about. He says, Seva sadhaka rupena, siddha rupena chatrahe, tadbhava lipshunakarya braja lokanusharataha. So there he's mentioning that one should serve in one's sadhaka rupa or sadhaka deha, and one should serve in one's siddha rupa or siddha deha. Tadbhava lipsuna karya brajalokanusharata, following basically in the footsteps of the mode of one of the eternal associates of Braj, in relation to which one feels attracted to serve for eternity in Leela. So there are a few other statements similar to that in Chaitanya Charitamrita and so on. So, of course, when I'm saying this can mean different things for different people. Of course, we are not against Srila Rupa Goswami. We are not against what he has said there at all. But how that plays out has been different in particular lineages. And there's place for that also, I will say. There's not something that there's only one correct way of doing things and everyone else apart from how do I do things is wrong or something like that. um, to begin with, I will say, and Bhaktivinoda Thakur makes this point in his Jaiva Dharma. Of course, he received Ekadash Bhav, which is basically the technical expression, these 11 Ekadash Bhav, or existential ingredients that make for one's identity in the lila, which one is meditating, and so on. He received that from his Diksha Guru, Bipin Bihari Goswami. And he himself, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, writes about this in some of his books, like Harinam Chintamani and Jaiva Dharma. So, for example, in Jaiva Dharma, he mentions that actually there are two lineages in this connection coming from Sriman Mahaprabhu and his associates. And he calls one is the Antarpanta and the Bahir Panta, or the external path and the internal path. Not the saying one is better than the other, just external and internal. You will understand why now that I describe it. So he will say, from Bakreshwar Pandit, who is a well-known associate of Sriman Mahaprabhu, very talented dancer, came the external path. External path means externally you are being conferred this particular information about your name, form, dress, service, group, and so on in the Lila, in the Braja Lila. And that extended through that particular lineage. Bakreshwar Pandit, Gopal Guru Goswami, the name disappeared now, Dhyana Chandra Goswami, and so on. They composed this Sri Sri Gaur Govindarchana, Padati, and this type of handbooks, if you will, in which, in a more systematic way, this system of what today we call or we know as Manjari Bhav Sadhana was delineated. This was not delineated in detailed way by the Goswamis, but just general idea was mentioned, and in some particular lineage, a system was developed on the basis of that. So that's one particular expression, if you will, of how to attain perfection, some particular methodology. And on another side, we have what Bhaktivinoda Thakur calls internal path, Antarpanta, which came from Raghunath Das Goswami. And it's internal in the sense that there is no external giving of that particular information, but it all reveals by the Achintya Shakti of Srinam, basically, by the unconceivable power of the holy name. For those who have that faith, that happened. Srinam can reveal everything. Of course, to not think like that will be an offense to the name. That's technically speaking one of the things that are mentioning in the list of Namaparat, to not have full faith in Srinam, and so on. So with this, I'm trying to say these two are bona fide paths. I'm not saying one is good, one is another. But of course, as with everything, also as bona fide as a path may be, they can also be sometimes abused, or they can be misunderstood, or they can be embraced from a cheap perspective, from a complacent side, one or the other. I don't want just to say in one single direction, because you may hear me and think, oh yeah, Maharaj, you are referring to Siddha Pranali and how many people is giving and taking this cheaply and eventually even engaging in moral acts. And that's basically what Prabhupada Bhaktisiddhanta called Sahaja, or even Prakrita Sahaja. And of course, that has happened, and that's applicable in that direction, but also can happen in the other direction. We may just quote unquote receive Srinam, although everything is there, as we know, Ninja Sarva Shaktis, and all the potential for revelation can come from there, as many of our acharyas have not only told by experience, but we can also be complacent in that direction, and we can be abusive in the name of everything is in Srinam, but actually I take some form of easygoing stance, I'm become lazy, basically, trusting that, I don't know. Okay, my Guru Maharaj told me to chant this number of rounds, and I think that only by chanting my prescribed number, I will attain Golok Vrindavan, just by doing the number, if you will, by doing the math, but not but by without the need of investing my will in a particular way. So I can really, how to say, uh, nourish my chanting, if you will, nourish my increase my sambandha gyan that will accompany my chanting. You follow? It's not just, okay, Harinam is everything. Nam Chintamani Krishna Chaitanya Rasa Vigraha Purna Sudab Nitya Mukta Vinatvam Namanamino. Oh, we can render lip service to these types of ideas. No, yeah, everything is in Srinam. Srinam is perfect. It's like a touchstone, non different from Krishna, eternally liberated, pure, transcendental. Everything can come from that. Yes, but how much we have faith in that? How much we are, and how much we are showing the level of faith we have in the way of how we conduct ourselves in our life. How much we are playing out our beliefs in our achar, in our personal decorum. So there's place for that, indeed. Once it is known that someone asked Sri Gaur Kishore Das Babaji, someone approached him and asked him about the Siddha-deha. Which is my Siddha-deha, Babaji Maharaj? And he said, that will be revealed. That's basically say that's waiting for you in between the syllables of Srinam. Your Siddha-deha is waiting for you there, if you will. That information, that revelation is there, like sending that person back to Srinam, back to do your homework and chant properly, basically. But again, we can be chanting and only chanting Harinam, if you will, quote unquote, only, but be complacent and just have a superficial type of faith in, okay, I'm chanting my whatever 16 rounds or whatever number you're chanting, and think whatever you have committed to with your Gurudev. I'm thinking I just need to reach the number, the daily quota. But that's mostly counting more than chanting. So you need to increase your sambandha gyan. You need to nourish your kirtan through to Shravan and eventual Smaranam and specific. The more you advance, the more the nourishing will become more specific in a particular sangha, sajatiya, sadhu sangha, and so on. Anyhow, I said I will be giving a summary of those 5 lectures. So again, my opinion about Siddha-deha is sometimes it's that information is shared by Sri Guru from outside, and that's a whole long big point. And of course, I know there are different opinions about this. So the idea for some is the Guru is having a revelation of who you are and giving that to you, or also, and I take that stance, and Bhaktivinoda Thakur also takes that stance, is the Guru is giving you like a placebo, like a general model on which you can meditate according to the particular affinity you may have, or the particular affinity the Guru may has, and is extending that to you, because as we already explained, Bhakti is not inherent, so it's not that you already have that particular affinity. So the Guru may give that particular set of model of information, so you can meditate in time. If you feel the need of certain adjustment here and there, the disciple is expected to consult that with the Guru and adjust those details as a way to facilitate meditation. Like my Guru Maharaj likes to say, this type of delivery of Ekadash Bhava and so on is a particular way to approach, okay, how do I conceive of myself as an eternal servant in Lila, and how I progress in the Ragamar. But again, it's not the only way. That's a problem when these type of things are given to unqualified people. And I personally think that this type of information is not to be shared with everyone and anyone from day one. You have to have certain level of maturity and adhikar to deal with that, because if not, many unbecoming things will come from that. And with this, I'm not only referring to immoral things in the name of Rasa Lila or whatever, but also fundamentalism, fanaticism, in the name that this is the real thing, this is the only thing. Whoever has not received this has no connection whatsoever with Mahaprabhu's grace, and so on. And of course, the other extreme, which is whoever receives that is a sahaja in a derogatory term, and so on, which is also not necessarily the case. And so we have to be careful of not going to one extreme or to the other and just absolutize a particular situation, and think everyone is in that particular group, no, in negative terms. So again, there is place for that, but that has to be done in particular parameters with a particular adhikar. And again, that's not necessarily totally absolutely necessary for each and every single person. Mhm. You can receive Harinam and you can attain your revelation of your ultimate identity in the Lila through Harinam. Mhm. As we see many examples of this. Gorkishore Das Babaji is one of them. We don't have information that he has received Siddha-deha himself, nor that he has given that to Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. And maybe some devotees may say, well, actually he did, you don't know. Whatever the case, I mean, again, it's not, we are not making here the point that if you have received that, you are better than if you haven't received that. Like my Guru Maharaj likes to say, if you want to see the Deha, well, first you have a Sadhaka Deha. Rupa Goswami first mentions Seva Sadhaka Rupena, and then he says Siddha Rupena Chatrahe. You are to serve in your Sadhaka body, and then you can serve in your mentally conceived meditational body, we call Siddha-deha. But first you have to do something with your Sadhaka-deha. So my Guru Maharaj likes to say, if someone asks you, did your Guru give you a Siddha-deha? And you can reply, well, he gave me a Sadhaka-deha. Is that not good enough? And you have to do your homework with your Sadhaka-deha. And the more you apply yourself in sadhana, in your Sadhaka Deha, in proper shelter and association, that will also naturally give rise to a Siddha Deha. That's the experience of many again. So again, there's not absolute need of receiving the Siddha Deha from outside, but that can eventually become manifest from the inside. And in that way, you can also engage in Siddha Rupena Chatrahe. Again, we are not dismissing Rupa Goswami's instruction of serving in Siddha Rupa. The difference of opinion is mostly how that Siddha Rupa comes to us. And again, there is place for these two systems that I'm describing in certain parameters, because if not, both of them can be misleading, abused, and so on. So regarding the second part of the question, which says why Bhaktivinoda Thakur and Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati stopped the chain of Siddha-deha initiation, even though it actually means that they received their Siddha-deha from their gurus. Again, as I mentioned, in the case of Prabhupada Bhaktisiddhanta, it is not confirmed, at least, that he has received Siddha-deha from Gorkishore Das Babaji. He received Diksha from Babaji Maharaj. So, of course, if he has not received Siddha-deha or Siddha Pranali or Ekadash Bhav, however you may like to call it, from his Gurudev, naturally he's not extending that to others. He's not giving what he has not received in that sense. That said, if you want to take that stance, Prabhupada Bhaktisiddhanta hasn't received that, he nonetheless realized that. Whether you like to, of course, consider him, okay, he's a Nitya Siddha, so he's not that he realized that, but you can say, well, in the unfolding of his Leela as a Nitya Siddha, he showed that realization at one point. He even mentioned that name, his name, in one particular Nayana Mani Manjari, to one letter to one of his intimate disciples. Or, of course, if you want to consider his sadhana siddha, you can then see, okay, he attained that particular perfection without having received, if you will, that information from outside, but by the strength of his engagement with Harinam. As we know, before even beginning his great campaign with the Gaudiya Math and so on, he sat for Satakotinam Yajna, which means he chanted 1 billion names. This is a brat, a vow that he made, which basically takes almost 10 years. chanting 3 lakhs per day, 192 rounds per day, basically. So my point with this is because sometimes we hear some people saying, "Oh, Prabhupada Bhaktisiddhanta was not a Ragamark personality. He was more into administration and expansion and preaching. He was not that much of a Bhajananandi." Mm. But when you study his life and you see which is the background of his preaching campaign, it's full of bhajan, it's full of rag. Again, I mean, to do a Satakot Nam Yajna, you have to have deep taste for Srinam. You cannot just sit for the whole day for a decade absorbed in Srinam. You go crazy if you don't have the adhikar for that. So he did that, and that was in the background of his Gaudiya Math. And he had deep attachment, as my Guru Maharaj likes to say. For most of us, it's difficult to sit and chant. But for someone like Prabhupada Bhaktisiddhanta, it was difficult to get up from the chanting, from the sitting. And nonetheless, with great difficulty, he got up from his deep bhajan and full of compassion and overflowing, and byproduct of his own bhajan, he extended that to others in the form of Gaudiya Math. So in that sense, it is mentioned that he attained that realization, if you want to call it, consider it in that way, or he showed that at one point of the unfolding of his lila by the chanting of Srinam and of course other angas of bhakti and so on. And even he shared that information with a few selected disciples that were of course as well uh, pretty advanced. So Srila Guru, that's also another way. That's my point. No, Srila Gurudev may not have received externally this Siddha Pranali, but may have realized his her own identity in the Lila. And if some disciple is advanced enough as to be in that situation as well, or close to that, Sri Guru will see that and will assist his student into ascertaining, if you will, the minutiae, the details of that particular identity as well. So that one's from the side of Prabhupada Bhaktisiddhanta. In regards to Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he received Siddha Pranalis, we know, from, as I mentioned, Bipin Bihari Goswami. And he didn't stop giving Siddha Pranali, actually. For example, he gave to one of his sons, Lalit Prasad, he gave Ekadash Bhav. I mean, Bhaktivinoda Thakur was the Diksha Guru of Lalit Prasad. So in the moment of Diksha, he gave Ekadash Bhav. That's a well-known fact. But again, Bhaktivinoda Thakur was not the Diksha Guru of Prabhupada Bhaktisiddhanta. So Diksha Guru of Prabhupada Bhaktisiddhanta was Gaur Kishore Das Babaji. And Gaur Kishore Das Babaji didn't share that information with Prabhupada Bhaktisiddhanta because arguably he didn't receive it himself, which again doesn't constitute something less, as we can see. So basically, that will be my reply to this. There is place for that, again, just as wrapping up. It's not something totally wrong in every single case, as some may think. There's place for that. So we honor that, we respect that as a bona fide expression of our tradition. But again, it's not the only way. It's not Nasti Eva, Nasti Eva, Nasti Eva. Shastra is saying that for Harinam Sankirtan, Harinam, Harinam, Harinam Aiva Kivalam. Kalo Nasti Eva, Nasti Eva, Nasti Eva Gatiranjata. There's no other way, there's no other way, there's no other way apart from Sri Harinam Sankirtan. So that type of emphasis, exclusive emphasis, have been put on Sri Harinam, which of course those who have received Siddha Pranali or Ekadash Bhav, I hope they are also, I mean, I know many of them, of course, they may put lots of emphasis in Sri Harinam. It's not that they dismiss that. But of course, in different lines and groups, there will be also different stressings of different aspects of sadhana, and each one according to their own individuality will feel some particular attraction most towards whatever meditation, chanting, hearing Bhagavad Gita, whatever. And there's place for that. Our acharyas have made that clear. You can attain perfection through any of these main expressions of Swarup Siddha Bhakti, sometimes called Navavida Bhakti, Shravanam Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam Archanam Bandhanam Padasevanam Archanam Bandhanam Dasyan Sakyamatma Nivedanam. So again, there is place for Ekadash Bhav, but there is place for for Harinam. There's lots of place for that, and it's important that we also properly develop that faith that everything can be actually attained by Harinam, but at the same time not abuse that idea, but understand, yes, everything can be attained by Srinam if I apply correspondingly, if I apply myself in the proper way with the proper attitude and guidance and Sambandha Gyan, for sure everything comes from Sri Harinam. So there is place for these both opportunities, but we are to be very careful about engaging in either of them, whatever may be the situation we are in a mature way, with adhikar, not with fanaticism, not in a us and them mentality, because that's just kanishta projection and neophyte prejudice, like I belong to the real thing, and whoever doesn't have what I have is not basically doing anything, and these type of things that are really unbecoming and actually fostering apparat in the name of the real deal, the higher thing, and so on. So I hope that helps. I'll go to the next question that is shared here by Radha Giridhari from Bulgaria. So thank you for your questions, and again, for whoever is connected at this moment, you can send any question you may have on the chat, on the thread you may be seeing this lecture through. So her question says, can you explain how Krishna experiences pleasure through our senses? That's an interesting question. So how Krishna does experience pleasure through our senses? To begin with, of course, Krishna is known as Hrishikesh, which means the Isha, Hrishikesh, the Isha, or the controller of the master of the senses, which of course imply he's the master of his own senses, he's self-controlled, although it doesn't seem so in the Lila. But that's not lack of control of the senses, but just like divine overflowing of prem. So he has controlled senses, and we can approach him with controlled senses, if you will. That's one point we can make. Now, you need to control your senses to relate with someone who has controlled senses. In some level, you can make that point. You can fully take advantage of that connection if you try to become as that person in that sense. If not, you won't be able to fully understand that person. You won't be able to fully reciprocate with that reality. Of course, the fact that Krishna is the master of the senses, the practical implication for us sadhakas is that our senses are meant for his satisfaction. Our senses are not meant for our satisfaction, which it may sound simple, but it's a pretty revolutionary idea, to be honest. Because, I mean, the norm, at least on this world, is exactly the opposite. The orientation is 180 degrees in the other direction. My senses are facilitators for what we even call vishaya or sense enjoyment. Each one of our senses for us constitute doors, holes in our body, if you will, doors through which we can relate to the world, we can relate to reality, and we can incorporate stuff, impressions, so-called enjoyment, and try to make that ourselves. That's the, if you will, the intuitive way we are moving as conditioned souls. We are trying to gather and to take things and make them ours and try to possess them, although that's not possible, as we know. but under the influence of Maya Shakti, that what takes place through each one of our senses that Krishna himself describes them in the Gita as dwaras, doors, Mm. We receive these different samskars, impressions from the world, and we try to acquire, we try to contemplate, we try to own, to enjoy, and to, because of the false sense of identity that we have, in which we think the more I have, the more I acquire, the more I enjoy, the more I am. Mm. The more I get closer to who I actually am. And that's the, again, invisible, even subconscious way we are moving in conditioned reality. Mm. Trying to be more by having more, by enjoying more, by owing more, by whatever. We feel this false sense of expanded self, which is, again, it's an illusion. It's not actually happening. It seems it's happening, but it's not happening. It's an appearance of reality, as we spoke yesterday. That's the very meaning of Maya and Mrisha. It seems it's something, but it's something else. It seems it's something else, actually. So, generally, that's our orientation as Bada Jivas. We think, again, even without an official philosophy, even without telling that to ourselves consciously, that's happening, going on in the subconscious. We see these senses as bridges, facilitators, opportunities for us to be who we are, be more, relate with the world, acquire what I feel I need, and so on. So we really depend on them. They are, for us, as very crucial tools to basically be someone, to have an identity. Again, I am speaking in conditioned life. If you take, I mean, for most of the people, that's why Srila Prabhupada emphasized so much, you are not this body, making this point of, actually, the body is made up of senses. If you take out the senses from your body, there's no more body, basically. What remains there? So, physical body, I refer in this case. So, the idea of using our senses for the pleasure of Krishna's senses, that's a very revolutionary notion, if you will. Atmendriya pritipam chatari balikam, Krishnandriya priti cha dhare premanam. So calm or selfish desire means that you are in love with your senses, basically, and everything revolves around them, and you organize your life around them. Mm. All your daily agenda revolves around the demands of your senses. The demand of the mind through the medium of the senses, to be more precise. And Krishnandriya priti chadhare premanam. And on the other side, that's calm, that's selfish desire, a sense centered reality. But Krishnandriya priti chadhare premanam. But prem, divine love, means that your life revolves around Krishna's sense enjoyment, not your sense enjoyment. But how can I increase Krishna's sense gratification? Through my senses? That's interesting idea. That's the very definition of, one of the very definitions of bhakti. Sarvopadi vinirmuktam tat paratvena nirmalam hrishikesh hrishikena hrishikesh sevanam bhakti ruchate. Bhakti means to get rid of all false senses of the identity, from all designations, sarva upadi, vinirmuktam, be absolutely, completely released, free from that. Which is what we were mentioning, trying to, that's a tatastal action, actually. That's like the secondary byproduct of properly engaging in bhakti. And the main attribute, swarup lakshan, means hrishikena hrishikesh tribunam bhakti ruchate. Like you dedicate your life in the seva, doing something for the pleasure of hrishikesh. And how hrishikena, you engage your senses for the pleasure of the master of the senses. That could be a definition also of sadhana bhakti. Srila Rupa Goswami said, Kriti sadhya bhavet sadhya bhava sa sadhanavida. Nityasidasya bhavasya prakatyam hridi satyata. Sadhana bhakti means that you engage your senses for the pleasure of Krishna, and therefore the heart is prepared for the descent of Nityasiddha bhava, for a particular spiritual affinity that will come from the heart of the Nityasiddhas. So on one side, I'm saying this because Hrishikesh and Hrishikesh, the importance of senses in connection to the master of the senses and giving pleasure to him. We are getting closer to the reply. That's part of the building to that, how Krishna experienced pleasure to our senses. On another side, we could quote one more verse, which is an important one in this connection. Atasri Krishna namadi nababet grahayamindri sibonmukhehi jivadosvayameva spuratida. So, in the conditioned life, senses are like basically trapping us. Jayato visayapumsam sangate supajayate, and so on. The description of how one falls in this world, like the Bhagavad Gita is saying. But at the same time, the senses can facilitate. This verse that I'm quoting says, actually, Krishna, his name, form, attributes, lila, are totally transcendental. Are not you cannot grasp them with your senses. So then we may say, well, so what to do with my senses? But interestingly, the second part of the verse says, Seva onmukhehi jiva do swayameva spuratida. But if you engage those same senses in Krishna's seva, you will have Krishna's purti. You will have a revelation of Hari. So the same senses that entangle you in conditional existence, those same senses engaged in the context of bhakti, used under the shelter of Swarup Shakti, Mahatmanastumam Partam Daivim Prakritim Ashrita, that comes in the 9th chapter of the Gita. Krishna is speaking there about devotees, Mahatmas, who move under the shelter of bhakti. Daivi Prakritim means divine nature, is another word for Swarup Shakti, which is another way of speaking about bhakti. So he's saying those same senses that are not able to attain Krishna, to understand Krishna, to touch Krishna, when those senses become infused with bhakti samskars, they become facilitators and they allow for Krishna's purti, revelation of Hari. So the point is, we have this Siddha-deha, we have this body of a practitioner that Sri Guru gave us when conferring us new name in initiation, new sense of identity, kantimala, tilak, and so on. And that's who we are, if you will. That's our new sense of identity. Now I'm a sadhaka. So I'm supposed to identify myself as such. That's my identity, as we were speaking before. Before even asking Siddha-deha, what you are doing with your sadhaka-deha. So sadhaka-deha means an identity revolving around sadhana, because sadhaka means he who engages in sadhana. So sadhaka-deha means a stage of my life, if you will, which revolves around sadhana, which is all about using my senses, allowing every pore of my body, as my Guru Maharaj likes to say, to be poured in, to pour bhakti samskars in every pore of my body, and in this way spiritualize my sadhaka-deha more and more till Siddha-deha manifests. Diksha kale bhakta kare atma samarpana, say Krishna tar kare atma, say kare atma sam. So Krishna is saying there, in the moment of diksha, or the culmination point of diksha, I will say, when the disciple offers one's own self fully to Sri Guru, Sri Krishna, Krishna makes the body of that person equal to his. In other words, that body becomes transcendental. And that's how Krishna experiences pleasure through our senses. It's not black and white thing, but the more we allow bhakti to enter our senses, to be expressed through our senses, we have to use our will to allow that to happen. We have to exercise our will as sadhakas. We have to choose on a daily basis, how much do I allow bhakti to be expressed through me, to enter in my senses, to be part of my life. Of course, bhakti is coming out of her own accord, as we know, yadrichaya. So, but I can choose to open the door or not, if you will. And how much do I allow that person, if you will, to enter my house and become part of my life and live forever there, and so on. So we have to exercise our will. So the more we allow that to happen, the more we allow bhakti to be poured on our senses, the more our senses become spiritualized and can give pleasure to Krishna, because Krishna's pleasure is only in connection with Swarup Shakti. he doesn't have any experience outside that particular circle of influence, that particular realm. Krishna has never been in Maya, technically, to put in that in simple terms. He doesn't know what does it mean to be under the influence of Maya Shakti. That will compromise his position as God. Mm. So he only has an experience, a sense, sense enjoyment in the context of bhakti. So the only way we can provide him some pleasure through our senses, use our senses for this, the pleasure of his senses, is that our senses become bhakti-like, if you will, Krishna-like, spiritualized by the entrance of Swarup Shakti. So that's what we are trying to do in our stage as sadhakas, trying to allow bhakti to express itself more and more in our particular life. And in this way, bodies, mind, senses, everything will become more and more spiritualized till the point that you have fully spiritual identity, what we call, and that in that spiritual identity you can serve Krishna in the lila directly. That's the only way you can actually enter there. Again, you may receive this information externally, as we mentioned in the previous point, but if I'm not doing my homework as a sadhaka, I'm not there. Because it's Siddha-deha, technically speaking, is a bhava-deha ultimately. Our perfected body is a body made of transcendental emotions. So you have not received that, I have not attained that level of insight. Whatever I receive is more like a theoretical, conceptual orientation to facilitate my meditation and do the sadhana that eventually will allow that to happen. So in that way, Krishna experiences pleasure through our senses. We have to spiritualize them, engage them in bhakti, and through our senses, we will give pleasure to Krishna's senses. That's the very goal of the entrance of Lila, and that's the very reality of Prem. Again, Krishna Ndriya Priticha Dhari Premanam. That's Prem, to live for Krishna's sense enjoyment. And how do you give enjoyment to Krishna's senses? Through your spiritualized senses. So the more we are spiritualizing our senses, the more that's touching, allowing Krishna to experience some sense, transcendental sense pleasure. And we are in that work in progress as sadhakas. Anyhow, some words on that. I hope that helps. And we have some few questions more here. I will just address one more, since we have some activities here in a while, and so I don't have time for all of them. So I will continue with the next one. It's a question by Kishore Gopal. He says, what does it mean to exist under the jurisdiction of Daivi-sakti? I've heard that our karma still plays out, but in a sort of curated way according to Krishna's arrangement. How we are to understand our journey as sadhakas in the more linear sense of action, reaction, minute independence, etc. Seems like the opportunity to see Krishna in every experience is always available, but whether or not Krishna is arranging everything is not clear to me. And there is something else. He says, I'm thinking on the verse Mahatmanas Tumam Partam, where he gives a qualification to being sheltered by the divine nature. I just quote that verse interestingly. So thank you so much for the question. So we will concentrate the last few minutes of our lecture here. Of course, it's a question that includes many questions, if you will, and many potential answers in many directions, and require a lifetime of unpacking. And that's great. Those are the best questions. Those in which you can say something, but you have to say, actually, we need lifetimes to continue further playing out implications of that, and that keeps us engaged in Harikatha. So, yeah, that's in connection to this verse of the Gita very directly. Mahatmanas tumam partam daivim prakriti masritaha. Basically, the first two lines of the verse, Krishna is saying, the Mahatma, as I mentioned before, a great soul, he uses this term only to refer to his devotees in the Gita, are those who remain under the shelter, Daivim Prakritim Asritaha, who have taken shelter of Daivim Prakriti, or another way to mean Swarup Shakti, whose essence is Bhakti. In other words, I don't want to continue pounding this post, but Bhakti is not inherent. So if you take shelter in Bhakti, then you receive Bhakti, if you will. But if not, it's not that. It's that you have to take shelter in that particular, let's call it, energetic department. So yeah, if you take shelter in him, certain things will happen that won't happen if you don't. And of course, the taking of shelter is not black and white. Always over and over again, we have to get accustomed not to think in terms of, okay, he's surrender, he's not surrender, he's a devotee, he's a non-devotee, he's a demon, he's a saint, he's a karmi, he's a bhakta. And we develop this extreme black and white dichotomy in which, okay, now I'm a devotee. Yesterday I was a non-devotee, now I'm a devotee. And that's very subtly takes to complacency, because now I'm already a devotee. I did my part, so now I'm on the other side. I'm saved, even, you may think, as we spoke also in the beginning, we may abuse this type of ideas. Okay, I'm chanting my rounds, I'm following the four principles or whatever. I'm done. I mean, it's just a matter of time. I'm going to Golok Vrindavan. Yes and no. I mean, if that's not just only following and doing stuff in a certain quantity. You have to invest your will in quality. And in that case, yeah, it's a matter of time. So going back to the first part of the question, our karma still plays out, but in a sort of curated way according to Krishna's arrangement. Yeah, there are different ways to look at that. We have spoken about that in some of our previous lectures. And on the Brahma Stuti, I would recommend Kishore Gopal or whoever who likes to go specifically to the verse in which Brahma is famous verse, Tatenu Kampam Sushamik Shamano, in which we have analyzed a little bit this, because that's a very important verse in this connection, where Brahma is saying, those who earnestly want your mercy, while dealing, receiving, accepting, tolerating the result from their previous misdeeds, they keep glorifying you, worshiping you with mind, body, and words. And they became really worthy of receiving mukti pade or bhakti in the highest form. So basically the implications of these verses for a devotee who is surrendered to Krishna, and again, I'm not saying surrender or non-surrender, you play out, as the idea is, as much as you are surrendered, this will happen. It's something proportionate, basically. Krishna is saying that yatamam prapadinti tam stataiva bhajamyaham. As you worship me, as you approach me, as you surrender to me, there's reciprocation accordingly. So a devotee who is surrender, and again play out the idea of the implication of that, Krishna will reciprocate with that person. Krishna himself say, I personally get involved in the life of my devotee. Now, if you, before being a devotee, before putting yourself under the shelter of Daivim Prakritim, Swarup Shakti, we were Tatastha Shakti under this so-called shelter of Maya Shakti. That was basically our situation. Tatastha Shakti, influenced by Maya, exclusively, if you will, influenced by Maya Shakti. So the presiding deity for that situation is Paramatma. That's clearly explained by Jiva Goswami in Paramatma Sandarbha and other places. Paramatma is that aspect of the Absolute which presides over conditioned souls. The influence of Tatastha Jiva Shakti combined with Maya Shakti. Now, when we speak about Bhagavan, that has to do with Swarup Shakti. Bhagavan is the presiding deity of that department, Swarup Shakti. So when we as Tatastha Shakti put ourselves under the shelter of Swarup Shakti, Bhagavan, and our Bhagavan is Sri Krishna, presides over that particular experience, influence, situation, and he takes charge of it. In other words, Krishna involves directly and personally in the lives of his devotees. So whatever, let's say we as a devotee before, we may have incurred in karma, in different conditioned activities, or we may continue doing to do so. But if that's taking place, or if that took place before entering in touch with bhakti, again, I'm giving examples here, there are some reactions that will come eventually to your life. But if you at one point accept bhakti, again, there are levels of this, the reactions you are receiving are no longer to be technically considered just merely karma. If you want still to speak in terms of karma, Sri Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur will say, then we can say Shobhana karma, which means beautiful karma. In other words, that's not only the reaction to your past misdeeds, but Krishna is himself administrating that now, managing how that reaction will come to your life in such a way that it nourishes your bhakti. So it's no longer to be seen as merely material chain of action reaction, but to be seen as Krishna is personally being involved in my life and sending this particular result to me. Actually, Srila Sridhar Maharaj will say, the devotee will think, if I will have to be actually receiving the actual result of my previous misdeeds, I will have to receive this size of result, a big type of reaction. But Krishna is so merciful that he's sending all this in this particular reduced form, if you will, or curated, if you want to put it like that, as you mentioned. So in that way, you will end up concluding, perceiving, actually, this Krishna's arrangement in my life, he's protecting me. And the end conclusion is you end up increasing your own surrender, you end up glorifying him instead of feeling, I don't know, why this is happening to me, this is not just, what to speak of going in that direction. Mm. So again, all this will have to do according to how much shelter we are taking in bhakti. That's proportionate. No, Sri Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur will say something similar in one purport to the Bhagavatam. Now, once Siddha-deha is spiritualized, as much as we engage it in bhakti, as much as we treat it as a Siddha-deha, the more we do that, proportionate to our receiving of bhakti samskars, our Siddha-deha is transcendental. And the more you do not do that, you have some ordinary portion there yet, if you will. But again, if you are a devotee and sincerely you are trying to do your homework, Krishna is taking personal arrangement, and we should develop that type of faith and conviction. That's one of the aspects of surrender. Again, if you say, I'm trying to surrender, okay, one aspect of surrender is Rakshishati Vishvaso Goptritve Vananam. Krishna is, these are the Swarup Lakshan of Saranagati, the main attributes of surrender, which is I have full conviction that Krishna will protect me, that Krishna has protected me, is protecting me, and will protect me. And whatever comes to my life in the context of bhakti, I will see that as Krishna's personal involvement in my life, protecting me, providing what I need, preserving what I had, that he says in the Gita, Yoga Ksheman Bahamyaham. As we were speaking these days, so many verses in Shastra where Krishna reassures how he is involved in the life of his devotee, how his devotee will never perish. Kanteya prati janihi name bhakta pranashati. How if you properly engage in bhakti, there's no loss nor diminution. Neha vikramanasasti pratyabhayo na vidyate. Swalpamapyasya dharmasya triyati mahato vayat. How if you surrender to him, there's nothing to fear. Sarvadharmam parityaja. He said, Masuchaha at the beginning of the Gita, Masuchaha at the end of the Gita. So we as sadhakas, again, as you mentioned, we have always the opportunity to see Krishna's hands be involved in our life. And whether Krishna is not arranging everything is not clear to me, you're asking. Well, you have to ask yourself how much you want that to happen, basically. How much you want to have that level of involvement of Krishna in your own life, how much you are allowing that to happen. Again, Krishna is a gentleman, if you will. He will not impose himself in your life if you are not inviting him. Of course, he's willing to participate. He wants to have an eternal life of love with you, with each of us. But we have to do our part. Again, we may have minute independence, but there is something we have to do with our will. Because if not, there is no meaning to the idea of reciprocal dealings, loving relationships, if we do not choose voluntarily to do that. So I will say the main question is not so much how much Krishna is involved in my life or not, but how much I'm allowing that to happen. I mean, he may try his best, if you will, but what I'm doing for that to happen, how I'm conceiving that, receiving that, accepting that, as we were saying the other day, a little bit as a joke, like sometimes we may pray to Krishna for mercy, and he gets involved in our life. Okay, my devotee is asking for mercy, and he makes some special arrangement that comes to our life, and that's his mercy. But we are not willing to accept that mercy. We already thought, actually, mercy should come in this particular way, and that's what I need. So since it doesn't fit my idea of mercy, we start to pray him back again to him. Please send me mercy. And Krishna says, you are praying mercy for mercy, so you are protected from my previous mercy I sent you. So my point is, we have to be not only sincere, but in time get more and more educated about what does it mean that Krishna is arranging everything. Because again, arranging everything doesn't mean that we stop having free will. No, we stop being an individual with choice. So Krishna, of course, has his own will. He has real free will, and he's willing to participate, if you will, in our lives. He's inviting us to do so. But again, we have to take the invitation. We have to accept the gift. That's what Srila Siddhar Maharaj once said. He said, this is the only thing we have to do. That's our part. Krishna is making everything else. He's doing the main part of the job. Our part is basically accept, extend our hands and accept the gift. That's all. Krishna is giving the gift. Krishna is giving everything. You just have to trust in the giver of the gift. Extend your hand and accept the gift. And sometimes that's difficult. Sometimes we don't fully trust in the background of the gift. Sometimes we don't see the gift as a gift. And we don't see, therefore, the giver of the gift as a real giver of a gift. So first we need to have those things in place, to educate our Shraddha, our faith, our conviction, to really trust Krishna, to really understand he's trustworthy. He's worthy of our faith and confidence. And when that plays out in our daily life as a sadhakas in the form of different situations or of things that we feel as challenges or tests, we have the proper vision, the proper eye, the proper appreciation to see, no, actually, this is the extended hand of Krishna trying to show me affection. Of course, that extends to our relationship with Sri Guru and the sadhus, which, again, we should have this faith and conviction. Of course, we should understand why we should have this faith and conviction. This is not an artificial imposition, as Srila Prabhupada will say, but this should be the most natural, organic conclusion. So, and of course, in certain stage of our sadhaka life, we may not be able to see the full picture regarding how Krishna is orchestrating the different situations we are in and so on. But eventually we will awaken more and more to that reality. And again, that he's doing that orchestration doesn't mean that I had just to remain passive and do nothing. Sometimes those situations, again, will basically be kicking out of the comfort zone and an invitation for us to think for ourselves much deeply, and to realize, okay, this was what Krishna wanted me to be in, basically. And so it takes different forms. It's not that arranging everything will come smoothly and I don't have to do anything. I just to be carried by the current and not just, I mean, I have to do something, although in comparison to what Krishna is doing on his side, what I may be doing is close to nothing in one sense, but that almost nothing may seem like a lot for us, and it's okay, and we have to do that. We have to apply ourselves in sadhana and make the best of our efforts with this particular idea. Yeah, the more I surrender to Bhagavan, the more I voluntarily surrender, choose to surrender, try to trust in his will and his affection, the more he's being invited to participate actively in my life. And the more I'm allowing that to happen, of course, the more he's will make all these divine arrangements, whether I see them or not. That's an important point also. It's not that I have to perceive the miracle. Okay, Krishna is making an arrangement. We have to understand so many things that we may be taking for granted, unfortunately, that we may be seen as an ordinary daily thing we get accustomed to, are also part of Krishna's arrangement. We may take for granted Sadhu Sangha, Prasad, Hari Kirtan, Shastra, all these different items that make for our Krishna consciousness movement. We take them for granted because maybe they are with us from birth. Yesterday I was speaking with some devotees, second generation devotees, and they were telling me that it's beautiful to be born as a devotee, but also it has its own challenges. In this case, that you take Krishna consciousness for granted because it has always been there. It's part of your life from day one. So you have not chosen that in one sense. So at one point of your life, you will have to choose to be a devotee. It's not enough. I was born in a devotee family, but I have to choose voluntarily myself with all my will. I want this to be not only part of my life. I want to voluntarily choose and in that way be born again in Krishna consciousness, rediscover the whole movement. So some thoughts in connection to how to deal with that. But again, I will recommend also some further exploration in the connection of the verse I mentioned. And of course, we can continue extending our conversation personally, since Kishore Gopal is here in Michigan as well later, or in any other way. So thank you so much for the question. And I see here some other questions sent by Tapumaya Prabhu. But again, I have some activities in a few minutes. He's asking about Sukriti. So I will recommend you have my book there in Delhi. So please go to chapter 3, if I'm not mistaken. That's a chapter of Sukriti. You have my reply there in a whole chapter of my book. And there's another question concerning past sins and the Guru's role in it. Again, we can leave that for next one. Please save that. And we continue speaking very soon. So thank you so much to all of you for your time, for your presence and questions. And see you hopefully tomorrow at 12 p.m. local time here, EDT time. We will be sharing our Nam Kata. The boats here will be having 12-hour Kirtan festival. So we will be speaking some words about the ontology, glorious position of Sri Nam Prabhu. So hope to see you there. Srila Gurudev ki jai. Sriman Mahaprabhu ki jai. Sri Harinam Sankirtan ki jai. Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Gaur Praman Hari Bo. Vancha kalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhyaiva cha. Patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namah. Ananta koti vaishnava vrinda ki jai.